Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and a slightly nostalgic episode, not because the wines in particular have great memories, but because the grape does. One of the very first trips I took with my now wife was to South America. We went off to Argentina and we went and visited Mendoza. And I've mentioned this before. We talked earlier on in the season about the Paul Wallace Malbec and my love of Malbec, and that's extended this week into 4 Malbecs. Now, Malbec's not easy to make in South Africa. In Argentina, it's fantastic. The 17th of July this year was the same as the 17th of July 5 years, 10 years and 20 years ago. Rainfall, temperature, everything is consistent. South Africa, very different. And that does give us a lot of fun variety when one year will differ from the next, and exploring those differences is part of the joy of wine, particularly your red wines. But when it comes to Malbec, you really want conditions that are fairly consistent. Now, the first Malbec comes from Diemersfontein. More importantly, it's the label I love, Carpe Diem, seize the day. And we seized the day when we were in Mendoza to go out to Cookmans, sit on the first floor, eat a 5-course steak meal while gazing out over the vineyards and up to the snow-capped Andes. It's one of the most perfect days I've ever had. It was also a day that made me realize how much my wife likes Malbec, and so whenever I travel, I do my best to find Malbec and to bring it home, because finding Malbec in South Africa hasn't always been easy. But I've got 4 here today, and I'm hoping that at least one of them can become one of my wife's new favorites. And Dimansfontaine is the first one to try. It's an estate I first stumbled upon after a round of golf in Paarl looking to do some wine tasting. This was where I ended up, better known for their pinotage masquerading as Milo, but it is the Malbec we'll try today. Dimansfontein is from Wellington, and Wellington's not a part of the South African wine world that gets the kudos it deserves. It's not really seen as being rock star territory, but when you look at some of the estates they have there, people like Bosman, like Doolhof, like Skalkberg, Velbeduct, there's some really good wine being made in that part of the world, and Dimansfontein is another example thereof. The pinotage is the one you've almost certainly tried, but the Malbec is the one I want to try out tonight. So definitely the Malbec characteristics, that softness, the cherry feel to it, very little touch of spice, slight smokiness. It's a very nice Malbec. It's very solid. It's still not quite some of the stuff I had in South America, but then that is the pinnacle. But as South African Malbecs go, that's a pretty good start. Now, there are many reasons to have a bottle of wine. Mostly, I'd like to think celebratory, but occasionally you do need to drown your sorrows. And I suspect they might have been doing a bit of that out at Druk My Niet. Sadly, the entire farm burnt down, included the House of Tuisjes, the famous Afrikaans writer, historic buildings. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but it has had a huge impact on the estate, and I don't think we're going to see vintages this year. They've still got some wine in barrel, but they do have a little way to get back on their feet. So as much as this is trying their wine, it'll also be a toast to their improved fortunes going forward. Now, the first thing that catches the eye is that colour. Have a look at that. That is so dark and brooding and deep and intense. That's a really, really nice Malbec colour. It's very alluring. Not that I really needed much encouragement to try a glass. A slightly different Malbec, this. Feels a little ripe, tannins are just a touch overwhelming, but still some nice structure to it, and a nice bit of dark chocolate coming through there, which is also a Malbec hallmark, and a smokiness there as well. Certainly lasts on the palate. This one's not disappearing anytime soon, and I hope that the wine won't disappear, because they've been through some tough times, but I'd love to see Druk My Niet back, and back as soon as possible. Then on to a new discovery, and I found this in a dark corner of Norman Goodfellow's near Leuven in Johannesburg, where I pick up a lot of my wine when I'm looking for stuff in Johannesburg. Solly and Carrie have got a terrific operation, and if they've got something there, it generally means it's something that's worth investigating. This is a little corner of Stellenbosch, the Oakley plant, and what's quite interesting is the historic side to this, the archaeology angle, which is novel for a wine. The vineyards are awash with old stone artefacts, some of them 40,000 years old, which is about the same age as Solly Kramer, who owns Norman Goodfellows. And this is their 2013 malbec. I've got no idea what it tastes like. I've never heard it before, but I'm hopeful I'm about to discover something special. To be honest, it is just slightly underwhelming. There's a very smoky feel to it and not quite as much depth as I'd like on a malbec. You do pick up a bit of that black cherry, and maybe another year or two it'll find its feet a little more. But I think what it does say most of all is just how tricky it is to make malbec in South Africa, and it's not really a reflection on any particular winemaker. It's just the combination of our terroir and our climate, and that climate in particular, that does make it a particular challenge. So it's not a bad wine, but it's certainly not at the kind of level that you experience when you're traversing through Argentina, eating vast slabs of meat and swigging back endless bottles of malbec. And then to wrap up our Malbec journey this week, AnnexKloof. This is out between Paarl and Malmesbury, the three Basson brothers, following on the footsteps of their dad and his dad before them. And what makes this a particularly good one to try is that Hugo, the Basson brother who makes the wine, has got a real passion for Malbec. He went to Argentina in the early 90s, discovered Malbec, probably discovered the delights of Malbec in Argentina, which generally involves beautiful views and lovely steak, and he decided that this is something he wanted to do in South Africa. It's their flagship wine. It tends to sell out pretty quickly, and that suggests we could be onto a good thing here. Well, that's more like the Malbec, I know. Some lovely dark rich fruit. It's a rounder wine. There's a little bit more to it on the palate, and it's a nice example of Malbec. It's made by a passionate man, and if you've ever been to Argentina, you know that passion is the defining quality of every Argentinian winemaker. And clearly Hugo picked up a little of that on his travels, as well as a little of the technique and finesse used to master the art of Malbec. All four of them doing their best to make what they can in South African conditions. Probably the best Malbec I've had in South Africa is still Paul Wallace's out of Elgin. I think he's making some really nice Malbec. I also quite like the Doolhof Malbec. I've had a couple of nice ones from there. But again, I think what it really says in South Africa is that Malbec is very much a challenge if you're going to try and make it here. It's not to say that it can't be done, but it's not always going to be easy. Malbec trip to South America, one of my great journeys. Maybe in years to come, Malbec will be spoken of in similar terms in South Africa. For now, give our local ones a go, compare them to the South Americans, see what you think. Cheers.